We're gonna wrap up this series of tour videos with the area that's right around the vegetable garden. We showed off the vegetable garden in like the 10th or 11th video because it was in pretty good shape and I knew we were gonna be delayed filming these. It's been a month over the time period where we've filmed these tour videos, and now the vegetable garden is definitely, after lots of several 100-degree days, 106-degree record day, so on and so forth, first week of August, there's definitely things that have declined, and we've taken a few things out. I've even planted some magnolias in there that are for a project. That video's already gone up way before this one did, for the first plants we're gonna be planting down in the Wallace garden. So again, we're just gonna circle around this. I don't know that I'll cover every single thing in this bed because a couple things are gonna be moved around later, but there are some great plants in this space as we go around, and some of them have some pretty good stories as well. This pittosporum, this is like the first thing. There was a chain link fence where Steph was standing right now to film this. We took down earlier in the season, and now this is just opened up. This pittosporum, this is Pittosporum heterophyllum. Pittosporum tabira is the main species that's typically used in gardens. This one has a smaller leaf, and this is the variegated version of it. It's such a great ornamental plant. We had this one in a container for a long time, and so it's a little thin, but typically this is a very, very full, compact, evergreen, variegated plant. We were down at Spartanburg Community College, and they've used them as really narrow boxwood-like plants between the sidewalk and the building. Great plant. There's one at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum that I think that's beautiful. There's one at the Juniper Level Botanic Garden. Cannot figure out why this plant is just not in everywhere. I mean, just why it's not in every nursery that I go to. I don't know, but it's a great, really great ornamental plant. Can't oversell that one enough. The other of the dwarf redbuds that we have, emerald, is right there. We have emerald and amethyst, and I think it was probably about the 3rd or 4th video. You can go back and see the purple foliage version of this. This is just an incredible dwarf redbud. I mean, look at this thing, how compact it is. Look how close the leaf internodes are together. So you have the same heart-shaped leaves that you would expect on a redbud. We had these planted in the vegetable garden over the winter time because we just didn't know where they were gonna go, so they were stored out there, and they bloomed like crazy. Really a tremendous amount of flowers on these. A few of the other redbuds, and I think it's the 2 videos ago, I talked about the Golden Falls redbud back there, the weeping one. It doesn't bloom, it blooms, but it doesn't bloom as well. But that thing actually blooms incredibly well. Don't ultimately know how big it'll get. You know, it's dwarf. I think it's just gonna continue to creep up over time, but it would be easy to control the height on it, 6 foot or under probably for the next decade without any problem. Then there's a skylight, better boxwood. We have one of these out on the front the front fence, and then one here, and then we have the other 3 planted in the garden as well. I think we actually have 3 starlights. There's one in a container, one right here, and one over there. The main reason I have more of this one is because this is the most adaptable one, I would say, that we could turn it into a Christmas tree or a round ball or whatever the heck we want to do with it. Really very versatile boxwood. There are actually 4 different ginger in this planting along the driveway edge. We, again, love plants with stories, and so three of the varieties came from Ram and Tom Giberson's garden, and I think the one that's taller is the one we got from Bobby Green. We were touring his garden. We're going to talk about one of his camellias in this video. We were at his garden, and he just took a shovel, grabbed a piece out of the ground, had virtually no roots and no soil on it, and we carted it around in a trash bag for another 2 weeks on the road probably, and then came back home with it, planted it in this corner over here, and it's just done beautifully. The ginger room's super late in the season, so it's just getting started now, and so as we're filming this is the first week of August. It will be blooming through the rest of August. And people on the tour wanted to know if we were growing corn over here in this corner, and it does kind of look like the right height. It kind of fits with that, but this is all 4 different ginger varieties planted together. And again, we love plants with stories. eventually we'll have to control that a bit. That's going to colonize. And with that much competition between them, they're going to really try to colonize to get out of there. Every plant's going to want to get out of there to find its own safe space. There's zinnias filled in along this entrance. Any bare patch we had leading up to the open garden, we were adding some things here or there, but all these dwarf zinnias are so easy. There's actually some strawberries here as well. The strawberries will ultimately own this space, but the zinnias were there for this summer while we're waiting to get some growth on these strawberries. There are 5 different basils planted. There are a lot of herbs planted around the vegetable garden. That purple basil is incredibly decorative, and we use it in containers. We use it in the ground. It's super, super easy to grow. It really shows up well in the garden, and if you put white flowers or chartreuse foliage against it, or yellow flowers, I mean, anything that's contrast against that purple foliage, it's amazing how well this actually works. The basil, we don't mind the basil blooming. Some people do. If you're going to be harvesting it, as you go during the season, you may want to be cutting the flowers back or pruning it throughout the season to keep it from producing flowers, because that kind of stops the foliage growth, and the foliage is what we're looking for if we're eating it as an herb. These 4 of the varieties we could just do from seed here, and the African basils down at the end will show you last. One of the best pollinator plants in the garden, but it is not one that's from seed. It's a sterile cultivar, so it has to be done from a cutting. So if you get one of those, you need to take a cutting on it each year and keep it for the following season in the house or something. We have asparagus, and it takes years really to establish asparagus in the garden if you're buying small ones. And these are finally at the point where I think next year we'll be able to get a couple here out of the garden. I'm never going to have, it's not like we're growing asparagus to sell on the side of the road or something, but we'll have a few pieces there. And it's such a decorative plant. It's such a beautiful decorative plant as well, regardless of whether or not we were ever going to eat it. That soft texture is amazing. Looks great with that purple basil, really. There's some Melampodium down here. This is an annual for us, but it's a self-seeder. And what we have to do in the spring is kind of make up our minds which ones we want to keep and which ones we don't want to keep, because they'll be back. And we recognize this plant pretty early on from just a few leaves, and so we'll pull them pretty quickly in the spring, but we'll allow ones to come up here and there, because there's nothing more prolific in the garden than Melampodium. I mean, there's no annual that actually beats it. There are some really vivid yellows and then some duller yellows. So this might be one you buy the first time you're buying it. Just make sure you're getting a really vivid yellow one, and then it'll self-seed after that if you're interested in that happening. There are 4 butterfly candy butterfly bushes out here. These became pretty readily available during this season, and I think you'll see a lot more of them on the shelf next year. They're obviously dwarf butterfly bushes. This hasn't really been pruned. This is how it's grown this season. It's probably right at hair over 3 feet tall at this point. They're all called Lil something. So there's Lil Grape, Little Lavender, Lil Coconut. This is Little Lavender you're looking at right now. Lil Coconut's the white one. Little Raspberry, and we'll come in a little closer on Little Raspberry as we move up. And then what's the pink one? Little Taffy. Little Taffy. That's what it is, and it's right behind. And it and Little Coconut. I think if you want the smallest of them, Little Taffy, Little Coconut, and Little Grape, I think are the 3 most compact. And then, but Little Lavender and Raspberry get more like 3. I'll stand next to this one. You can see it's probably closer to 4 feet in height at this point. But this color is like no other. And I've grown, literally tens of thousands of butterfly bushes, rooted cuttings for other nurseries, and grew them out and sold them for years. And this is a color like no other that's, in butterfly bushes. So if you're looking for something that's really, really unique It's also a little taller because we had some herbs and things laying up against it. This place was crowded a bit, so there's an issue there. What have I missed going back that way? Lots of basil, butterfly bushes, Melampodium. Right, this is Buxus sempervirens variegata. I've got this one is a 2-ball that I got on clearance, and we turned it into a 2-ball topiary. I've talked about it several times. I want to get a 3rd ball, but I'm waiting for a vertical piece to kind of show itself off. There's another single ball topiary coming up around the corner in just a second. We have a dwarf pomegranate. I have some concern that it's grown 2 feet this year as to how dwarf it actually is. It stayed pretty small last year and you know, grew very, very little. And I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be pretty neat. This year it's exploded in growth, and it's been covered in flowers for weeks. Unfortunately, it wasn't flower. I think it maybe only had like a flower or 2 during the open garden. And since then, it has just been full flower the rest of the time. They have such unique flowers, whether they fruited or not. The flowers are just that really unique orange, bell-shaped flowers on pomegranates are really, really nice. And then the foliage is nice. They're just nice ornamental plants overall. I think sometimes we think about adding things to our gardens for fruit only. Like that's the only thing in the mind about that pomegranate would be, am I going to get fruit on it? But I actually just think it's a great ornamental plant. I think our guava we're never going to get fruit on here in all likelihood, but the plant is just beautiful. This blue foliage, you know, blue-gray foliage, neat flowers. Same thing with that pomegranate. There is a little lime Nandina in a container here with some polka dot plant. The polka dot plant's eating the little lime Nandina a bit. It just needs a bit of a, you can come through here and give this a haircut. This is just really starting to get some new growth on it. But you see that chartreuse new growth that it gets. The pot's surrounded by more of that Melampodium. This is a golden sky pencil holly. It gets asked about a lot. I was planting these magnolias in a video, and I saw a comment, what's the yellow plant that's in front of you? It's golden sky pencil holly. It's gonna be a minute before these are available. It's just, it's a fairly slow growing sky pencil holly, unfortunately. So it's gonna take a little while for people to build up numbers, but obviously people are gonna want it. I mean, it's a, you know, cylindrical sky pencil holly, just like any other, but it's gold, you know, and it's chartreuse, and it's in the full sun out here. Sometimes these full-on yellow plants like this will burn in the sun, and this just doesn't burn at all. This little herb garden has red vein sorrel, which we don't actually eat, but it's more for decorative purposes in the garden. And then we have the regular green sorrel. We kind of know whether or not we have deer that will come and go. There's a greenway near us, and occasionally we'll get a deer. We know they're around when the sorrel gets eaten to the ground. It's their number one. I mean, you're gonna look at it. It looks like a salad bar, right? So they go right to that sorrel first thing. Hasn't hurt it ever. I mean, they just eat it to the ground, and it comes back bigger, better, fuller. It looks rough at this point during the season, and we could probably cut it down now, and it would come back out in the fall and put on some new growth and look a little better. There's rosemary, sage, what else do we have here, Steph? Fennel. There's thyme in here, oregano. There's all kinds of herbs. This is our kind of herb border. We have a ton of pollinator plants out here in the garden, and the herbs and the vegetables and the other pollinator plants that are here, all for the pollinators as well as for us. And having this many flowering things all together makes sure that we end up with enough we have no problem ending up with more vegetables than we'd ever want, because there's so many pollinators out here doing work for us. There's a diamond spire gardenia that's in full bloom here. Looks a little better than the one in the last video. It's newer planted. It hasn't had anything laying up against it like that one did. And again, they're in full bloom, and there's more buds coming. This thing came into full bloom in the spring, and now here we are in August with it flowering again. And I said I'd show off the African basil. This is a little smaller than it typically is for us by this time of year. We planted this one late. We didn't find it until late. These can get as big as 3 feet tall and 4 feet wide in a single season. You only need one plant. If you plant 3 or 4 of these, it's going to cover a big area over the course of the summer. But again, this is the one that you'd want to take cuttings on to keep it year over year, or you have to find a new plant. The other ones I could collect seed on and germinate the seed in the house and grow them back easily. But that one's an interspecies hybrid in there, and it just doesn't set any viable seed. One of the top pollinator plants in the garden, if not the top pollinator plant in the garden, and it's not showy. You know, it's for the pollinators. We kind of enjoy watching how many bees will be on that thing in the middle of the day. And here's that one ball, Buxus sempervirens variegata topiary. And we're gonna jump over here to the front of the building and show off a couple things we didn't before. We have this grape going across the top of it called razzmatazz. Had one of these at the old house as well. I get a few grapes on them. We have not gotten many because I've had to do a lot of pruning on it to get it to do this. So now that it's in basically the shape that I want it, and it's going over to that other side, and it's got plenty of sunlight over there, I think we'll get more fruit on it. And there is a lot of fruit that's up here. It's just small right now. But I like the way it goes across the top of the building. Grapes grow super fast when they're happy, and so it requires us to prune on it, you know, several times a year. There's an orange rocket barberry in front of the building, and if you watched the video we did with Jay Sifford, well, we've done a couple videos with Jay Sifford now. He uses these as like soldiers out in the garden, and they're just upright, narrow barberries, you know, that get about this tall, and just they have so much color. But it really allows us to plant something planted in this spot because they're so upright and narrow. This Dianthus was planted basically as an annual. They are perennials, but we planted it as an annual like 3 years ago during the fall, and it has just been the gift that keeps on giving. They're incredibly full, despite the fact that it was 106 degrees one day this summer. It's just absolutely incredible how good they look. There's a caladium here, and we kind of had no idea how it got here. I think some soil got dumped out here, and so it was in a container. I think the soil was a little bit low up around this barberry, and there's a caladium. It picked the perfect spot, right? It picked its own new home in the garden. There's a Camellia in front of it called Thoweel, and it's an upright, narrow one. We'll keep that Dianthus away from it and let it come on up. It should be a little upright, narrow conifer over the next few years. We buy these conifers in super small containers around in the fall or around Christmas time. Typically they have them at most of the garden centers. And then they can go in a container for like 2 seasons, and then they go in the ground. And so we can get years and years and years out of them. But ultimately, we'd like to have this one up about this high and something super narrow in that spot. There's a sage that looks great there. We cut that. We cut the sage really, really hard, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, or maybe 2 months ago, and it's come back out and looks fantastic. Occasionally you got to do that. It'll get a little woody in time, and you can just shear the thing off, and then we have all that new foliage on it if we wanted to use it as a culinary herb. We could. Of course, it flowers like crazy. Great pollinator plant, regardless of whether you're using it as an herb or not. Great blue-green foliage, like a lot of great attributes to sage in the garden, plus it's perennial. This Cryptomeria is called Dragon Prince. It was one of the first plants added into the garden, and it just can't miss with that Dragon Prince Cryptomeria. It has never been pruned. It had one little brown spot on the back of it from that vine last year. Recovered from that pretty quickly. Just a great ornamental plant. Can't speak highly enough of that plant. It's similar to Globosa nana Cryptomeria, which is more widely available, but much more compact, much less ultimate long-term maintenance on Dragon Prince than there will be on Globosa nana, even if it's going to take a little while longer for them to get to the size that you want. Another one of Bobby Green's camellias out here, and of course it's got a weedy vine growing through it. But this is another October Magic Ruby. May have been the first plant planted in this garden project 4 years ago, and it's budded up like crazy. This thing has so many flower buds coming on it. It'll be mid to late October before we see any flowers on it, and then November will be kind of peak flower month for it, and it will just bloom and bloom and bloom. But look how compact that habit is. That thing's not been pruned. The one on the garden path over there, I've pruned a couple times because I'm trying to keep it a little bit lower, but this is not pruning after 4 years. Look how compact that thing is. We have several Hydrangea paniculatas in the garden. We have a variegated one, we have white wedding, we have moon dance, lots of Hydrangea paniculatas. This one was a gift from Dr. Durr when we visited him, and it's got all the flower parts in the middle. Of course, it's winding down on flowering just a bit, and we turned this one into a tree form, which I've been working on for the last couple of years. There's a video on the channel for turning this into a tree form. I'm gonna restake it this winter, and it's taken a minute. There were 2 plants in the container to start with, which kind of slowed it down, and then I probably didn't stake it as well as I should have fairly early on, and that loosened it up a bit. But now it's looking good. It's got good structure. I've shown in a couple videos how to make it, and then I've been maintaining it. And I got this kind of open form on it. Ultimately want it over the shed just a bit. Down to the right of that is the sunshine ligustrum, which if you've watched the video series last year, we had a sunshine ligustrum on the other side of the border over there. It was just gotten so big, and it was up against an osmanthus. We found a better narrow plant for that spot, and then gave this spot to a new sunshine ligustrum that will have a little bit more space to grow if we want to grow it. We can grow this in any shape you want to grow it. I can keep it this size forever if I wanted to, or we can let it get into a tree form, or I could tree form it. I could turn it into a Christmas tree, a meatball, or just let it grow. Doesn't matter. Now it's got plenty of room where it's at over here. Another one that needed room was this autumn bonfire encore azalea. This thing's budded up like crazy. Steph, if you could come over here and show this. Every single one of these branches has a flower bud that's formed on it here. And as soon as the nighttime temperatures cool at all, this thing's gonna come into absolute full bloom. It was happy where it was, but it was in too much shade. That made it a little bit thin, and we were only getting a few flowers on it when it flowered. Quick, I move it over to here, and this is, and Steph can vouch for this, maybe the sunniest spot in the garden midsummer. I mean, the sun's about to be up over a tree now, and this thing will cook the rest of the day, and it's just absolutely loaded with buds. So it's much happier and more sun than it was before. 2 things, this is actually off the property, and it is invasive, mildly invasive, I'll say. We see a few of them here or there in the woods. There's definitely things in the wooded areas around here, including like the Chinese privet that's behind it, that's much more overall invasive, and the English ivy that's trying to grow on the Chinese privet. But this clerodendron, or Harlequin glory bower, there's actually a lot of different species of clerodendron. This one is just super, super interesting. Really, really interesting flowers on it. There is nothing, again, this plant is not quite in the garden, but we've limbed it up into a small tree, and there is nothing that attracts more butterflies during the day. Even weirdly, even flies are on it, moths are on it, the hummingbirds are on it, and then I think this is the butterfly's #1 plant in the garden. By midday, this thing's just incredibly, it's covered in butterflies, and we have all these other options for them in the garden, and they choose to be on a, again, what is an actual invasive plant. But beautiful foliage, beautiful flowers. Once it starts flowering during the summertime, it never, ever, ever stops. I see a couple seedlings here or there, but not as many as you would think. Again, it's off the property, but I wanted to show it because it is such a unique and really special plant that draws in, non-native, that draws in all of our native pollinators. We planted this Twomley's Red Sentinel, a Japanese maple, in this spot. And I don't know how many Japanese maples between the containers and the ground. I think we went from 1 or 2 Japanese maples to maybe 6 this year, something like that. Twomley's Red Sentinel is a great one for sunnier spaces. This one will really hold its color in the full sun a little better than some of the other red Japanese maple cultivars. It's staked straight here to get a single trunk, and we'll eventually have it branched way up here. All of this rest of this going down will be eventually taken off in the future. Got a bumblebee here coming to the seedling dahlias, but we need to go through here, and I would encourage you, during the summer to go and look at all the things you do have staked up and make sure that they're not, that the stretch tie or string or whatever you're using is not cutting into your trees. Get it cut off, put a new one on. This little border here along the back of the vegetable garden is a combination of a few native perennials, a few salvia. So we've got some Amsonia, we've got some salvias, and then we have all of these seedling dahlias that we've collected the seed on and then germinated. And a lot of them were on the other side of the vegetable garden a couple years ago. Steph is showing you a salvia that's planted over here, and then show that Amsonia that's stuck right in the middle, right beside your right foot. Yeah, there's Amsonia, which is native. We've got several native perennials going across here. Further down, there's liatris, and there's coneflowers, and all kinds of native plants. But the vast majority of this border is the seedling dahlias, which we're not that great at staking, but they're truly amazing plants. And a few of them I'm eventually going to take cuttings on and maybe put some sort of name on a few of them, but they're all crosses that were made out here. And we're collecting the seed on them. Now, they're not going to come necessarily true to seed, but we can take cuttings on some of these if we want to use them in the future. But she just showed you a goldenrod, there's baptisia, all kinds of native and a few non-native perennials along this border on what is the northernmost side of the property, but the sun tracks across it during the summer, and it's in the full sun all day long. We're gonna wrap this series of, I think, 18 tour videos. If you go back to the first one, it's from the drone up above, and it'll give you some idea of how we've moved around through the front garden around that other side. And now, again, this is kind of the north. This is the middle of the north side of the property here, the top of the driveway and the start of the back garden. This is a red buckeye. We got this from Ram and Tom when we were down there, maybe last year is when this one came home. We've got white buckeye as well that also came from them a little further down, and I think it was in the tour video along the edge over there. If it wasn't, trust me, there's a white buckeye and a red buckeye. Eventually this will be limbed up into a small patio tree basically over here. And this is Forever Goldie thuja. This is our arborvitae. This is a thuja plicata. Thuja plicata is the western arborvitae, and they tend to be a little more heat tolerant. Green giant is a western arborvitae. It's actually a interspecies combo with plicata, but plicata tends to be a really good one for heat resistance, where our eastern arborvitae is actually native north of Pennsylvania, but is widely used, like emerald arborvitae, DeGroote's arborvitae. All those are widely used plants, but typically where a lot of people are growing them, it is just hotter than those plants want to be. But the western arborvitae here is definitely, again, more heat tolerant, really vibrant color here. I don't know if it's landed in its permanent home. It's a little close to this red buckeye. We had it in a container, and it was like one of those, we were making decisions on what container plants we were going to keep from last year to this year in containers. And this one, we decided it was time for it to go in the ground, and we're scrambling for a spot. So this is where it ended up. So it may not be in its permanent home. Again, it's a little close to this, but it does look great, and it can stay here for the next 2 or 3 years, right? We've improved this soil enough that it's reasonably easy for us to move plants around in this garden without having to work too hard at it. It's just easier. It's easy digging in this soil at this point. In fact, the spot that I'm standing on is so squishy. It's kind of wild how much we have improved this soil. And then that ginger's behind me that we saw where we started as we went around the circle around the vegetable garden. But there you go. Thank you guys so much for following along, who have stuck through 18 videos of this tour and the I think I counted 327 different species and probably upwards of 800-900 plants, total plants in this garden, if you include all the annuals and everything. So and not even in the bulbs. I didn't even thinking about the bulbs I didn't even think about the species of bulbs as I was counting them. So 350 plus, let's call it that. So again, thanks for following along.